Andy, on top of the spike in cases, really across the country, Florida is now, according to some health experts, about to be an epicenter of this outbreak. And dealing with all kinds of other things like, moratoriums on rent and housing, being lifted, and then the food crisis as well.
Right, of course. I mean, there's always the question of your health here, but there's the other issue of hunger. So many people, Fred, as you know, around the country have lost their jobs or having trouble filling their car with gas or feeding their families, feeding their children especially. You don't want to send a child out the door any time of day without food. So hundreds of thousands of Floridians are looking to get their children some food. Now, Congress promised hope months ago, back in March, and it has been very slow coming. The sun is just rising at this Florida food giveaway, and already more than 1,000 families are lined up. Many are parents who lost jobs, who still have hungry mouths to feed.
We have no food, and I have a big family, and they need to get fed. We don't have the money to buy groceries.
More and more parents are turning to food banks to feed their children while they wait for government aid that was promised months ago. Back in March, Congress approved a program called the Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer, or Pandemic EBT. It's supposed to funnel money to millions of children who are no longer getting school breakfast and lunch. Pandemic EBT issues cards to purchase food, $5.70 per day per child, or about $114 per child for 4 weeks of benefit.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. You never want a child to go to bed hungry.
This 12-year-old and her family haven't received any government aid yet. Instead, they waited in line for hours to pick up free food at this Feeding South Florida food bank. Are you glad that you're here with your mom this morning to get some food?
Yes, really glad.
About 30 million children nationwide are qualified to receive this aid, but there have been challenges in getting pandemic EBT rolling, such as outdated databases and limited administrative ability to disperse the money.
Some states have really great state education databases that will identify kids who are eligible for free reduced price meals, and you can link that up and easily get a card to them. For other states, it can be hard to identify the kids who are eligible for free reduced price meals.
The federal government, specifically the USDA, has left it up to the states to figure out a plan to implement the program. That plan then has to be approved by the USDA before the cash cards can be given to children. 42 states, D.C., and the Virgin Islands have been approved for the program. Analysis by the New York Times shows that by May 15th, 2 months after the effort was approved by Congress, just 15% of all eligible children had received benefits.
There is no border for hunger. Every state in this country has kids who live in households that are struggling to put food on the table.
On May 27th, Florida was finally approved for pandemic EBT. Even though they started rolling out 2 weeks later, hundreds of thousands of children are still waiting for their benefits. Without government aid, groups like Feeding South Florida have had to get creative. For the first time ever, they spent more than $1 million to purchase food for families. And the demand is greater than ever. Feeding South Florida says they've seen a 600% increase in families who need food. Jesus Sebastian has 5 children at home to feed. She tells me she's still waiting for government aid. This woman brought her neighbor and 2 small children to get food.
She's had a hard time, for sure, especially she hasn't gotten any government help.
We do wish that benefits had rolled out sooner. The need has been incredibly great. More than 40% of people coming to us are relying on support for the first time.
In response to our questions about the delayed aid, the USDA said they are working every day to ensure all Americans have access to safe, affordable, and nutritious food to feed themselves and their families. And Fred, we spoke to so many families there. I mean, you can only imagine how hard it must be for them to explain why they're waking their children up in the pre-dawn hours, packing them into the car so they can wait for hours to get free food. In fact, we looked inside some of the cars and the children were still asleep in the back seat and in the way back of the car. So it's very, very difficult for these families. Feeding South Florida says that since the coronavirus pandemic started, they've now jumped from serving 700,000 families to serving about 1 million families. It's very, very difficult to feed those young mouths. And also, Fred, because they don't have a lot of money, because they've lost their jobs, transportation is also a problem. Getting to these food banks to get the free food is a problem. That's why they need these cards so they can stay close to home, maybe go to the neighborhood grocery, anything within walking distance, Fred.